We have got 6 games and 16,000 different slates coming up this weekend for NFL DFS. You can play the Saturday through Monday, Saturday only, Sunday only, single game slates all across the board. A lot of different ways to slice this puppy. So we're going to break down all 6 games across Wildcard Weekend, get you our thoughts on them, and get you set to win some money over on FanDuel.com on whichever slate you want to play. This is the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brendan Gdula. He is the senior managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, the playoffs are here. We have fewer games to prep for. How are you doing today?
I'm good, but I think every single year I fall into the trap of assuming fewer games means less preparation, but it actually, I think, might be even more because this is like a double Thanksgiving slate where, on a full slate, we're not talking about like Isaiah Hodgins at a salary of like 6,400 or looking at like KJ Osborne with under the microscope, but you can't just gloss over situations as easily on a smaller, and I'm talking like in the context right now of a 6-game slate. You get the 2-game slate, 3-game slate, single game slate. Like it's not true that everyone's in play on small slates, but a lot, we're going to be digging deeper into depth charts than we typically do. So I think it's always a splash of cold water on the face every single year, but I don't think it's going to change. Even by next week, I will think it's a lot easier and it's going to be just as tricky.
Yeah, I think the good thing about this kind of week is that typically the content around NFL DFS is focused on the main slate, which means you'll have a lot more broad knowledge of the broad slate because that's kind of the stuff you're consuming out there. This week, like, you can play a lot of different slates, and honestly, like, our primary focus, I said primary, Brandon, our primary focus for this slate, this podcast will not be the Saturday through Monday slate, but we're going to talk about it. And like, maybe that means that the roster construction for that slate gets under discussed. Maybe that means you go that way because there are still good contests on FanDuel for the Saturday through Monday slate. So I think it's a good a good week to play different slates, play different combinations of slates, try to find the ones that might be underanalyzed, like the Sunday through Monday slate as well, stuff like that. Trying to find underanalyzed offerings to take advantage of the fact that this is more of a weird, wild, wonky week than we typically get across NFL DFS.
I like the alliteration there, Jim. You should be a podcast host or something.
Disagree. I avoided all bad words start with W, and I think that is impressive, but we're not going to press our luck. Instead, we'll talk about the slate overview here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts, because PGA is back. We are doing weekly podcasts every Tuesday, breaking down that week's event for Daily Fantasy Golf. We talked about the Sony Open in Hawaii this week, back again next week and every Tuesday to get you set to play some PGA DFS. If you want to fill the time without like Thursday Night Football and stuff like that, if you want to research something else earlier in the week, you can do that via golf. But also, Tom Vecchio has the Daily ISO every weekday breaking down NBA DFS. Get those by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. The 2022 NFL season is winding down, and FanDuel and GMC are back to bring you the GMC Sierra Mountain Climber Pick'em, a free-to-play contest series that gives you a chance to win a share of $10,000 in FanDuel site credit every Sunday, courtesy of GMC. Of course, here's how it works. Every week, including this week, answer questions around that week's games. The more questions you answer correctly, the higher up the mountain you will move. If during any week you answer every question correctly for a perfect score, you'll reach the summit and win a share of $10,000 in FanDuel site credit. For more information, go to FanDuel.com/free/contest/GMC to get in that entry. FanDuel.com/free/contest/GMC today and start climbing the mountain. Now, we'll dig into each game individually here in just 1 second. But first, Brandon, I want to start things off by talking about your overall view of these 6 games. You can talk about short slate strategy. You can talk about players on this slate, whatever way you want to go with it. What is the overriding thing standing out to you as you look at these 6 games?
Just the one thing?
I don't care.
Okay.
I left it wide open for you.
We didn't say primary, so I didn't know what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
That was a pre-recording callback.
We don't just fight on the air. We fight beforehand too. It's good.
Yes, because focusing on something, you can
have more than one focus, Brandon. You can have more than one focus.
So I think for this week, whether it's the 2-game, 3-game, single game slate's a little bit of its own thing, but I have content about like how that stuff plays out as well. But last year, was it last year? I think it was last year. I wrote an article on numberFire. It's called Fantasy Football Stacking Guide, examining hit rates and correlations in breakout games. And, a lot of this stuff's going to, even I have to pull this back up and make sure that like the things that I uncovered are actually what I remember. But I think it's really important for this week, for all small slates, for the playoffs moving forward, to have correlations all throughout your lineup, because yes, you could go back and cherry pick the best, players in an individual game and kind of put together an optimal lineup over like a 3-game slate of stuff that doesn't really go together. But I think that that's going to be less common than finding, obvious correlations within a game. Even if it comes from unlikely sources, you should be able to sort of say like, okay, I can see why these players both made the lineup from this game, something like that. So I have, some takeaways at the bottom of that article. But one thing that does jump out to me is like, you're going to almost assuredly, at least on like the 2-game slate, play a defense against, players within your own lineup. I have numbers on like when a defense does well, which other positions, including their the same team or your opposing team, what are the odds that they do well? I think it's helpful. I don't want to run through like all of this stuff, but the QB1, wide receiver 1 stack is super important. Running back 1s kind of can be game script agnostic, game situation agnostic to a degree. If they have good projections, we're going to have some teams with clearer RB1s than others. So, I don't want to just point everyone to this article. But I do think that like this stuff's going to dictate a lot of how I'm building individual lineups, because correlation is going to be vital. And it's just, we're going to be able to make the case for the best process-based plays, but we're getting one iteration of how the slates play out. And you got to find those correlations and just sort of be okay being wrong, because you want to be able to be right.
I think it's also important to remember that even though we are deep into the season, we kind of know what to expect from most of these teams. Betting markets can still be wrong. So, make sure you are finding ways to be different without being dumb. And we talk about that for a full slate, but it's also true for a shorter slate. Now, you're not going to find guys at 5% roster rates as often who are like legitimately good plays, but finding ways to identify players who may be overlooked for one reason or another. Maybe they've been underperforming. Maybe they're in a game where bookmakers don't expect their team to do a whole lot. Maybe you disagree with the bookmakers. That's totally okay. And that's fair to make that assumption, make that leap, and play things that way. So definitely a different build in terms of overlapping players in the same team. You don't need as much upside. That's the primary reason not to pair a running back with a tight end or something like that, because if the running back scores, the tight end's not scoring. So on a full slate, I'm still fine with it, but it's not something I'm actively seeking out. Here, tight ends are probably going to be paired with a player on their team in almost every lineup of mine. I prefer to pair them with the quarterback because, they are touchdown dependent. I'm assuming the quarterback throws 4 or 5 touchdowns or whatever it may be, and tight end will probably benefit. So for me, it leads to lumping the tight end a lot with stacks. Specifically, tight end is the one that I do deviate most on. Like I do see that on full slates too, but especially on these shorter slates.
Yeah, and it's just like, again, it's sort of, we're both saying the same thing in a different way. It's like, just make sure that you're not going through and finding the best projected value plays and then plugging them in, because they might not have any sort of relationship. Again, that could could work out, but probably not the best way to build from scratch.
Exactly. Okay, let's dig in here to the first game on Saturday. This is the Seahawks at the 49ers. Right now, the 49ers are 9.5-point favorites over at FanDuel Sportsbook. The total in this game is at 42.5. Wind speeds for this game, they have been fluctuating. Right now, they're currently projected at 9 miles per hour. There's some rain there potentially as well, but not awful weather in any of these games thus far. Injuries here. Tyler Lockett got in a full practice on Tuesday and Wednesday despite his shin injury. He is good to go. Kenneth Walker III full on Tuesday, did not practice Wednesday. Sounds like that is load management for his ankle injury. He should be good to go. And that's important because DJ Dallas has missed both practices thus far. And there's no Travis Homer. He's on IR. DJ Dallas might not play. We might see 100% snap rate Kenneth Walker potentially in this game, depending on the way things break. 49ers, very healthy right now, especially with Eli Mitchell and Deebo Samuel coming back in a limited fashion last. So, Brandon, what are your overall thoughts on this initial game, Seahawks at 49ers?
Yeah, another thing that I was considering making like my overview is it's going to be tempting to look at like past matchups. We have a few of them on the slate.
Every single one is a repeat matchup.
Yeah, they're not all relevant necessarily.
Correct.
In the week 2 game between these two teams, that's when Trey Lance got hurt. Jimmy G came in after that. George Kittle wasn't playing. Jeff Wilson Jr., Jeffrey Wilson, Jeff Jr. Wilson.
Jeff
all
Wilson Jr. pops up, which is not accurate. I don't think that permutation is actually a thing we can do.
Yeah, he was still at San Francisco. Obviously, no Christian McCaffrey. Rashad Penny. We're talking about Kenneth Walker maybe playing 100% of the snaps. That was just a glint in the eye of an optimistic Brandon early on in the season. I ended up dropping Kenneth Walker and flowing the whole budget to get him back. But so it's going to be tempting to want to look back, but just don't get too caught up in that. For me, I think that this is just sort of, it's like DK's game. Like DK Metcalf, his market shares are like, if I had to pinpoint one thing that I feel great about, it's like I'm just going to load up on DK Metcalf because everything points to DK having the right building blocks for a big game. If you look at 14 matchups where Metcalf and Lockett both play at least half the snaps, Metcalf has a 27% target share, 41% red zone share, 51% of the end zone targets, 4.5 downfield targets per game, which for me are targets traveling at least 10 yards downfield. So, as an underdog, usually that's kind of a sign that they're not going to score enough. But on a smaller slate, especially a 2-game slate, I have a hard time not looking at this game and saying, I want to make sure I have enough DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I think the DK Metcalf, if you look at the full 6-game slate, you could argue he is the best value at wide receiver. And I don't mean value in terms of like lowest salary guy with a good projection. I mean like whose salary is the biggest gap between what I'd expect out of him and where the salary implies he should be. I think that he is arguably one of the best options across that 6-game slate, which means that for the 2-game slate on Saturday, he's going to be very, very good. So DK Metcalf in the full games he has played with Tyler Lockett, the overall target share is very good. It is at 27% in that time, but 34% of the deep targets and 40% inside the red zone. That's a 14-game sample. That is not a small sample, but DK Metcalf is getting a lot of work in that time. In the week 15 matchup on Thursday night, DK Metcalf, 9 overall targets there, tied with Tyler Lockett, first on the team. Marquise Goodwin played that game. He will not play here, obviously. And Travis Homer also had 4 targets. So I think we're going to see a concentrated target tree, and I think a lot of that will go to DK Metcalf. So I'm thinking DK Metcalf is going to be one of the standout plays across the entire slate. My question for you is, we both agree Kenneth Walker III has a good snap rate projection. We both agree he has a very good role. Does the matchup nullify that for you to the point where he is not a priority on this 2-game slate?
I think he still is a priority. We're going to talk we got to talk flex. I think that we can be okay not jamming in a running back in the flex on these smaller slates, but
for sure.
overall, with the projection being what it is for him from a workload standpoint, it's hard to move away from him based on like just marrying the snap rate and the salary of 6,600. Like that goes a long way. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, yes, we do have two superstar running backs on the slate with Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler, but I don't really love them. Mm-hmm. I can nitpick them both to a degree. And so I don't necessarily think that I need to get to them. So that helps me, get up to, or not get up to Walker. It usually feels like we're getting up to Walker, but just taking what we get with Kenneth Walker at that salary.
So I want to talk to you about McCaffrey because I think you could view him one of two ways. The first way is Eli Mitchell is active, which means McCaffrey's workload in those games has been pretty poor. In the games he's played, I'm excluding week 18 because he got pulled early, but the 3 games he's played with Mitchell this year, just 77.3 yards from scrimmage per game, 23.3 adjusted opportunities, which is carries plus 2x targets. You could view that and be like, hey, he gets a big downgrade, which he does. However, this is the playoffs. And I think that part of the reason why they were willing to limit him in those games is because it wasn't the playoffs. And the thought was to conserve him for the playoffs. I think we're going to squeeze out every single touch that went to TDP, Jordan Mason, guys like that in that stretch, and put them to just McCaffrey and Mitchell. Mitchell will still get work. And I think Mitchell is in play in the 2-game slate at $5,500.
Yes.
Because he's a very good player. They should get the ball in his hands. But if you're projecting out like against the Seahawks defense, like, I don't know, making up this number, 26 carries for San Francisco, I still think McCaffrey gets a lot of those. And as a result, I think he is well worth $9,800. I think it is tough to fit him in with other guys I want to get to, but I want to make the effort to get there because I think he is worth that. If I have to make a consolation at tight end and use Colby Parkinson, hypothetically, to get to Christian McCaffrey, I would like to. So I think I'm higher on McCaffrey than you because we've seen the playoffs in past years where running back snap rates get jacked up if they want to focus on that guy. I think that could have been part of the reason why McCaffrey is limited in those first 3 Mitchell games. So I think I am more inclined to think that we see McCaffrey with a 75% snap rate and 8 targets, and that makes him worth his salary at 98. So I think I'm a little bit higher on him than you are.
I think it comes down to, and again, I'm going to try not to defer to, well, it depends on your expectations and it depends on how you think this game plays out. They're favored by 9.5. We like Seattle from like a fun standpoint, but Seattle is reeling. They don't look very good. This game could get out of hand. So if you're playing the angle of, San Francisco goes out, does its job in the first half, Christian McCaffrey is probably not going to pay off that salary unless he has like a 2 or 3 touchdown first half, and he's the lone reason that they get there. But I don't
think in the playoffs I have to worry as much about blowouts because, like, A, the odds of the blowout are lower, and B, you're not going to pedal back unless you are 100% certain that you're going to win that game.
But they have Eli Mitchell, who they clearly want to get involved. If he was not there, I would say, yeah, I don't care about the score. They clearly want to get Eli Mitchell involved and can give him touchdowns.
Right.
So,
but I think that there are multiple paths to McCaffrey going bananas. Those paths it's a close game.
I comprehend those, but I'm also saying that I think there's enough reason to think that he is not. I'm not viewing him the same way that I would view him in the regular season without Eli Mitchell. Just because it's the playoffs, I understand the snap rate could be better. And I think that he can take advantage of this matchup, but what to you indicates that Eli Mitchell's not going to be relevant here?
Oh, I think it'll be relevant. I think that I'm going to have lineups where I have both McCaffrey and Mitchell in the same lineup.
That's fair. I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
Again, just because I'm a little bit low on McCaffrey doesn't mean I'm like out on him.
Right. I just think that they're going to concentrate things so much given the leverage in this game that Mitchell can get his 10 carries and McCaffrey can still get enough work via his work in the passing game and as a rusher and being efficient as hell, like to still be worth it. So I think to me, I like Mitchell and I will use Mitchell on this slate. His primary appeal is as a salary saver, which means I'm using him as a salary saver to get to McCaffrey, which means I'll probably have them in the same lineup decently often. But I think that actually is very viable for this slate. For the 2-gamer specifically. For the 6-gamer, I wouldn't do that personally.
I agree. So talk to me then in terms of, let's open this up, and we don't want to spend too long on, just this McCaffrey situation, but I think it's worth a little bit longer. 6-game slate. How high of a priority is Christian McCaffrey for you?
Pretty high. The problem is running back is very good across the 6-game slate. And there's good value on the 6-game slate because if you look at the 6-gamer, I like Jeff Wilson a lot under the assumption there's no Raheem Mostert. He's $6,000. Awesome salary saver. I am on board with Kenneth Walker III in the same game. I think that if you're making the snap rate increase in an important game narrative, I think Tony Pollard might be agent 0 for that. In terms of I don't know if that's the right way to phrase that. Anyway, I think he's a primary guy. I'm like singling out as being like guy whose snap rate could increase in a high leverage game. Travis Etienne as well. So there's a lot of value there. I think that I want to use a value running back to get to McCaffrey. So to me, 6-game slate, I can use guys like Darius Slayton at wide receiver on the 6-game slate to get there. So I think McCaffrey might be easier to get to on the 6-game slate. Weirdly, might be a bigger priority there. Is that weird?
I don't think it's weird. Again, like I'm not down on McCaffrey. I'm just saying there are reasons to think that there's a path to like an 18-point game where he scores, he has yardage, or maybe he has like 120 yards, but doesn't happen to score because this team will, spread the ball around. They have guys who can score. George Kittle, I almost called him Travis Kelce. He can score from 50 yards out. They can hand the ball to Eli Mitchell on the goal line. I see. Maybe it's just that I see a wider range of outcomes for McCaffrey than maybe you do. That's all.
But I like the wider range of outcomes because it implies 40 burger is in his range of outcomes, and I like that. So, yeah. I don't really care about his floor. It's fine. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not playing, so that's for me. Other notes in this game that I have, Colby Parkinson, I think, is viable for the 2-game slate. He had a 62% snap rate in week 18. He had 3 targets, 47 yards, and a 12.8 yard ADOT. He was really good in college, dealt with a lot of injuries his first couple years in the league with no Will Dissly. I think Parkinson is a super viable salary saver at tight end, $4,700. I think there are better options on the 6-game slate, but on the 2-game slate, I can get to Parkinson. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
We got to talk 49ers pass catchers.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I think Debo is undersalaried at $6,900. And so Metcalf, I said, is one of the best values across the 6-game slate. I think that Debo is not in that tier, but he's like a tier below it, which means very likely to have Debo on a 6-game slate and someone I'd like to get to on the 2-gamer as well. What are your thoughts on him, Ayuk, and Kittle?
Love Debo. I have him as one of my core plays for the 2-game slate. Who else you asked me about just now?
Ayuk and Kittle.
They're both like, I want to have Kittle as like a core play, but if I'm going to go the route of like getting access to a superstar for the 49ers, it is going to be McCaffrey over Kittle. Kittle does have that like runaway with the slate kind of potential compared to the other tight ends on the slate. So he's great. Ayuk for me is a little bit more of a secondary play. I'd rather go with Debo. I'd rather take some savings with some other guys in the next game. And then just quickly, 2-game slate only. How weird are you getting with quarterback with Geno and Brock Purdy? If you're building 10 lineups, do you have any of them?
10, probably no.
Okay, because is another thing, and we can speed through some of this for the next games, but you don't want to get too spread out. You don't want to share like 2 shares of every quarterback. It's not going to work out long term.
If I had 20, I'd get to Geno, I think, under the assumption he runs more, because he ran a decent amount last week and ran effectively, and I would not be shocked if that increases this week. I think Purdy, like best case scenario for him is like 21 FanDuel points, but that could be enough on the 2-game slate. So I don't think he's out of play, just not really someone I think I will use personally this week.
Agree.
Okay, let's move now to the nightcap there. The Chargers at the Jags. Right now, the Chargers are 2.5-point favorites. Total is 47.5. Injuries in this game. Mike Williams is yet to practice this week. He suffered a back injury in week 18. They sound optimistic he will play. I'm still a little bit skeptical of that. We'll see what practice reports are on Thursday. He is at least not at full health. No matter how you want to slice it, that's noteworthy. Joey Bosa, full practice Tuesday, Wednesday. He is good to go. Jaguars right now pretty much fully healthy. So Brandon, when you look at this game, what are you focusing in on as being the key thing to zero in on?
This one could go a lot of different ways, and I mean that in terms of like who has a big game, because there are multiple guys in this game that have paths to ceilings. I consider Keenan Allen someone who has a ceiling based on volume. He's one of the few guys who I kind of would bucket into his own tier. But even in games with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams playing at least 50% of snaps, which is a 4-game sample, he has a 29% target share, 2.24 yards per route run, 33% red zone share. I do think that the $8,400 tag, if whether we get Mike Williams or not, might make him a little bit hard to get to with McCaffrey there on the same slate. So I think that he could go a bit overlooked. But I do like that. And if we don't get Mike Williams, then someone like Josh Palmer, I'd bump up Gerald Everett. I'd look for these pass catchers for some value. So I feel pretty good about the Chargers either way. The question always comes down to what are we doing with Austin Eckler?
Yeah, it's a tough question this week because the Jags rush defense is actually very good. I know people are talking about, they finally bottled up Henry last week, but they've been doing that for a while. They rank in the 73rd percentile against the rush on early downs based on my numbers. So they're a good rush defense. The Chargers are not 8th percentile there. So of the running backs in this game, I am higher on ETN. Now, the counterpoint is Austin Eckler's snap rate tends to be around 60%. That could go up this week. With it being a playoff game, we know that even if they don't run the ball effectively, it doesn't really matter that much for him. And with Mike Williams being banged up, he could get a bump in target projection too. So there are a lot of factors that bump up Austin Eckler. And I would say if I'm tiering out like running backs on the slate in terms of prioritization, ETN is top priority, I think, in a tier of his own. I would say McCaffrey is in a tier of his own in tier 2, and then Eckler is in tier 3. Actually, let's put Kenneth Walker in McCaffrey's tier. Eckler, tier 3 with Eli Mitchell. I think that's the way I tier out them in terms of prioritization. I think that if I am to be wrong in Eckler, it would be too low, and that worries me.
Yeah, I have the same tiers aside from the fact that I threw Eli Mitchell into tier 1 just due to the salary.
Okay, sure.
But yeah, I'm with you. I think we need some Austin Eckler. I think you could make the case again. Process-wise, I much prefer Christian McCaffrey, even though it probably sounds like I was low on him. I prefer McCaffrey to Eckler. But, if I'm building only 5 or 10 lineups or something like that, or 2, and I just say, you know what, McCaffrey, I don't think he's going to have the huge game. I think that they're going to spread the ball around enough. I think Mitchell's going to do enough. I'm just going to go to Eckler. And then, over like 5 lineups, I think you can make that case. I just prefer McCaffrey from a process standpoint, but it doesn't come down to just who makes the most logical sense, because that's not how these small slates work.
I would say that if we're talking about the slate as a whole, this 2-game slate, I would say that I want my first set of action to be putting in a quarterback from this game, probably Herbert, because of the matchup. I think that the Jags should be able to stop the run pretty effectively. So starting off with Herbert, his salary is $7,800. That is very nice on FanDuel for this week. Start off with Herbert and then run it back with ETN. I think those are the 2 primary focuses here. And then where I go from there can change. I don't mind. I think that this is going to sound stupid. I think that my favorite stacking candidate with Herbert is Eckler because of Keenan Allen's salary. It's fine, but it is high. And if I want to get to ETNs and not sell my soul elsewhere, I think that I kind of have to be okay with maybe not getting to Keenan. I think that a naked Herbert lineup where he has no stacking partner is also okay. So Eckler might be my favorite stacking partner with Herbert. But having a Chargers passing game centric lineup paired with ETN as a bring back, I think that to me is very appealing. ETN with like Zay Jones as well, Evan Ingram, whatever it may be, that's also very good. But I think that I want to really focus on this game for like where I splurge outside of McCaffrey.
Yeah, I think that I'm with you. Whenever I'm building lineups, it's one of these two quarterbacks, then ETN, and then from there, it's where do I go? It depends on how I'm playing that particular lineup from an expectation standpoint for how the games play out. Talk to me about the Jaguars pass catchers, and can you rank them, including Evan Ingram?
Yeah, so if we're looking at the 14 full games with Marvin and Zay Jones both healthy, Christian Kirk has slight edges over Marvin Jones or Zay Jones in all three of the overall deep and red zone target categories. Evan Ingram, 17.6% overall is pretty good for a tight end on this slate. So I would say if I'm ranking them, Christian Kirk's salary 75, coming off a big game last week, I would rank him second behind Zay Jones. Zay Jones' salary is 63. I like that discount a lot. I think other people will as well. I think I want to give the NFL DFS public credit for being a little bit less point chasey than they have been in the past. They kind of doing a better job of analyzing things for that current week. So Zay will be more popular, but I'm okay with that. So Zay 1, Kirk 2, Ingram 3, but the odds that I have 2 of those 3 in a given lineup are pretty high.
Yeah, I think I'm going to even be open to like a Lawrence Etienne, Zay Ingram kind of just 4-player. Because look, I like Seattle. We like Walker. We love Metcalf. I guess we didn't really talk about Tyler Lockett that much, but this is the game that most people, including myself, are going to anticipate is the game. So it's easy to differentiate and go the opposite way, but this matchup, it makes a lot of sense because a lot of these guys have like between 18 and 22% target shares. I usually hate that on a full slate, but I'm going to be it's very welcomed on this smaller slate because if you plug in one of the quarterbacks from this game, ETN, and then one of the 2 stud running backs, it gets tough quick. So that's very welcomed.
So Evan Ingram is the better play between him and Everett this week. How tempted are you to deviate to Everett under the assumption that Ingram monopolizes most of the popularity?
It'll mostly be tied to who I have as quarterback in that lineup.
Very smart. I agree with that. Speaking of quarterback, we said that if we have 10 lineups, we're probably going with just these 2 guys. What is the distribution for you between the 2?
Probably go 5-5, I think.
I agree. I think the reason I go 5-5 as opposed to like 6-4 in favor of Herbert, despite liking his matchup, is Lawrence is more likely to get me rushing yardage, I think, than Herbert is. Lawrence, in the games where he's been like pushed, I know he didn't run a lot in that Tennessee game, but in that Jets game when it was raining, 7 carries, 51 yards. That was after his toe injury, and he was still pretty willing to run. So I think that Lawrence more likely to run and also likely to be less popular than Herbert. So I think that's why I would go 5-5 as well for the quarterback distribution.
Yeah, and I'm not going to argue with anyone who wants to like go with a different quarterback to differentiate, but I think you can differentiate in other ways on this, even on this 2-game slate.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Any final thoughts for you on this game or this Saturday slate?
I don't think so.
Okay, let's move to Sunday and talk about the first game there. Dolphins at Bills. Bills now 13.5-point favorites. Total in this game has shot down all the way to 43.5. That is because Tua Tagovailoa will not play here. He has been ruled out. He has not been cleared to practice as of yet. Teddy Bridgewater likely the backup behind Skylar Thompson. He was active as the backup last week, but did not play. So likely Thompson is a starter here for the Dolphins. Raheem Mostert has a broken thumb. Mike McDaniel did not rule him out. Mostert didn't practice Wednesday. I am assuming Mostert will not play. I don't think you can play with a broken thumb as a running back personally. So I'm going to assume he won't play. Tyreek Hill, not even on the injury report, despite limping through week 18. So he's good to go. And the Bills fully healthy on the offensive side as well. So what stands out to you for Dolphins at Bills, Brandon?
Oh, this one's tough. Love the Bills, which is not like going to shock anyone. I just don't know. And again, I understand it's the playoffs, but anytime I see a matchup that could be this lopsided, and especially for like the wild card weekend where teams don't have a bye, they don't necessarily, if it gets bad enough, it doesn't have to be like they don't have to push their guys too much, and they can sort of just take a milk the clock situation, even if the starters are still on the field. That being said, really want to build around Josh Allen on this slate.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to think about it differently.
The counter for the Bills thing, heavy spread would be they keep their foot on the gas during regular season games when they're up big. I feel like during the postseason against a division rival, they're not gonna pedal back. I think they go full bore and, take a flamethrower to them if they want to. And I think they probably will want to. So that's why I feel very good about the Bills offense, both for this 3-game slate and for the full 6-game slate. I think that Josh Allen is like, I was talking about McCaffrey being like a priority at running back. Allen is like creeping into that territory as a quarterback, which is not super common for me. Allen's salary across the 6-game slate is 92, very high, but well worth it. So I would say Allen to me is just a tremendous play, which is not surprising at all. The aid you can get in offsetting Allen's salary a bit is via Gabe Davis. I know Gabe has been awful. He's been pretty bad. It has burned me. It has burned everyone who is listening, I'm assuming at some point this year. But if we look at their target shares from week 6 on, and week 6 on for me is because there's no James Crowder activated, or he was designated to return and is practicing, but is not expected back this week. But from week 6 on, with McKenzie being active too, Gabe Davis, 21% target share, 33% deep, 25% inside the red zone. If you are getting that from Josh Allen, eventually it's going to hit. So I feel like Gabe at $6,200 is a standout for me and a guy I want to get to often. So I will use Gabe Davis as a way to lower the effective salary of my Bills passing game stack. Brandon, what about you? Thoughts on the Bills passing game here against the Dolphins?
Yeah, I was actually going to start with a joke and say that before we start, I want to make it known that I love Gabe Davis this week because Jim and I, believe it or not, had not even an argument. I just was kind of trolling with Jim a little bit and saying that I didn't like Gabe Davis that much. But yeah, it's a phenomenal workload tied to, the QB1 for the slate. I like Joe Burrow, but I think that the game environment is very, very different between the two. So it's going to be important to get enough Josh Allen on this slate. But yeah, I'm there with you with Davis. If you just average out those salaries, I'd be okay with taking the discount on Allen and overpaying a little bit in that sense to get to Davis. I'm never high enough on Stephon Diggs. So
yeah,
how high? Like you get 10 Josh Allen stacks to make it simple. How many have Diggs? How many have Davis? How many have Knox? How many have multiple? What are you thinking?
Knox would be in most, I would think, just because he has big touchdown upside. His yardage hasn't been that bad recently either. He's 56, so he is in line with some other guys who are pretty good. But I think I'd have him in a good chunk of those. I would say I'd probably go half and half Diggs, half Davis, just because if Josh Allen goes off, the odds that Stephon Diggs goes off are pretty high. So I can't go lower than half, I don't think.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I wouldn't normally get that high on a full slate, but on a smaller slate, it makes sense. One of the key takeaways from that correlation piece that I talked about is QB1 or wide receiver 1 is the gold standard. And we can very easily overestimate, wide receiver 2s and 3s in terms of their predictability of hitting it big. Not to say that Davis won't or can't. That's not the same thing. But it's telling me if I like Allen that much on a small slate, I should like Stephon Diggs because he is truly their undisputed wide receiver 1.
Right. On this Saturday slate or the Sunday slate, we have 3 stud receivers. I'm going to omit Tyreek Hill, not because of him, but because of the quarterback play there.
Yeah.
But the 3 studs are Justin Jefferson at 9,000, Jamar Chase 87, Stephon Diggs 86. Rank them for me, please.
I have at Jefferson. and I had Jamar and then Diggs, but I think I should probably go Jefferson, Diggs, Jamar.
Probably
Due to
fair.
game environment.
I think that I will let quarterback dictate ranking between Chase and Diggs. But I'd agree with you that I think that that's the way to play things. The Bills running back situation always sucks. They're pretty worthless. It is worth noting that James Cook did get an increase in his snap rate last week. Devin Singletary lost a fumble, and Cook did get some work. It's still not like a great role, but it's a small slate. Cook's salary is 59. Will he make it into the mix for you?
Probably, because in looking at the slate and who I have ranked as core plays, which I do based on like process, not necessarily just the value. I love Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. I like Dalvin Cook. I like Saquon.
All the receivers.
I need value, and I'm going to have to get imperfect some places to get access to a ceiling. So I think he's probably going to be there. Does this mean no Devin Singletary for you then?
I wouldn't touch him with a 15,000-foot pole.
So
I know that single digits can be okay on this slate, but I don't care. I'm just, if he burns me, he burns me. I don't care anymore. I'm just done. The other running back in this game is Jeff Wilson. I'm assuming now, as mentioned, that Raheem Mostert does not play. If we look at the full games Wilson has played with Mostert either out or limited, he has 97.5 yards from scrimmage per game. Did have one dud. It was like a 70-yard game against, or something. It was something low against the Texans, but he had like 143 yards in one game too. Wilson is 6,000. I think there are good odds the Dolphins get blown out, but kind of going back to what you mentioned at the top, we have to be okay with running backs in imperfect situations if their role is good. I think that Wilson is kind of like the poster boy of that this week. So how are you viewing Wilson? Is he a priority for you despite the bad setup for the Dolphins?
Well, if we're going to get like into semantics, priority only in the sense that I want to roster the studs.
And so is he like one of the first value plays you turn to get there?
Yeah, I have him listed for me as a core play because I know I'm going to be there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not simply because of his situation.
Right.
It's how important that salary is to getting to all of the guys we already discussed and have not even really gotten into a deeper, like a Justin Jefferson.
Exactly. I'd agree with that assessment of Jeff Wilson as well. Dolphins side, what are you doing, if anything, with the pass catchers?
Yeah, I mean, like Jalen Waddle had two big games against the Bills early on, but both of those games were with Tua at quarterback. I'm not saying they're out of play. Like if you're really banking on this game to play to the spread and Miami's throwing all game, volume's not really what you want from a quarterback. You want efficiency. I don't know if that's going to be there. You could make a volume-based case for any of the pass catchers just because they're talented. I will say that like Trent Sherfield ran 72% of the routes last week if you're going for like a true punt play, but he didn't have a single target. So
yeah,
I think it's really tough.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'd rather swallow my tongue and go, well, that's not a phrase. I'd rather go find a way to get to Gallup Gallup for the 6-game slate, Slayton for the 3-game slate. I can't get to Sherfield. I think for me, they're probably just cross-offs. And if it burns me, it burns me. That's okay. I just can't use everyone. And I don't want to use guys tied to a third string undrafted, I think, or 7th-round pick rookie quarterback. Although I guess Brock Purdy is also that, but whatever. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
I think we hit on everyone relevant. Okay. And you made a good point where you don't want to get access because I was thinking like, yeah, we need some Tyreek Hill but you can't play everyone.
Yeah.
If you do that, you're just going to shuffle around and that's not what you want.
I'd agree. Okay, let's move now to the Giants at the Vikings. Vikings are 3-point favorites at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total for this game is at 48.5. No real injuries to note in this game. I think everyone is pretty healthy. So Brandon, straight up, what do you think of this game, Giants at Vikings?
Yes, we got a recent meeting between these two. Minnesota won by 3, 27-24 in Minnesota. Justin Jefferson, 16 targets, 133 yards and a touchdown. T.J. Hawkinson ruining my personal fantasy season with a 2-touchdown game of his own. But I think we have value among the Giants receivers I think we have a superstar with Justin Jefferson. I think we have a running back at a reasonable salary in Dalvin Cook with a workload that I can get behind. I think it's realistically a no quarterback game or like a half quarterback game. I'd probably say, just in case I do build some different lineups, but all things considered, a pretty strong game for a small slate.
Yeah, it's not bad. I think there are some flaws in that neither offense is super explosive. So if I were like, this is mostly my pitch of like, if I get the read, this game will be super, super chalky. I could justify differentiating from it because neither offense is super explosive. That's kind of the pitch.
I agree with that. But if we look at the 6-game slate, we have Baltimore, which is almost a cross off, and Miami with the quarterback situation.
They're outside of J.K. Dobbins, they're a cross off. They're a cross off.
Well, and then Miami, like there's only so many guys there. So if you cross off or like really, really downplay this game, then you're looking at Buffalo and Cincinnati.
Sounds great.
Sure. I wanted to flag that. You can't punt 4 teams on a.
I might. Well, I'm not punting them. I'm saying downgrading them if they get too popular.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. So just downgrading, like I'd still use Dalv happily. I'd still use Jefferson happily. But like that's why I can make the pitch about Cousins and Jones. And I do think that like both those guys have appeal because Kirk Cousins, he's been more efficient since TJ Hawkinson got there. It doesn't seem like because they've gotten blown out like 6 times in that time. But he has been more efficient. He is at 0.12 passing net expected points per dropback with Hawkinson versus 0.06 before that trade. His ADOT has also gone way up. 8.6 with Hawkinson versus 6.3 without. So massive deviation. 19.9 FanDuel points per game. The Vikings defensively very bad against the pass, pretty good against the rush. So I could see playing this similar to the Chargers Jaguars game where the puzzle pieces match up pretty well, where I want the Jags rushing offense, Chargers passing offense. You can make the same pitch for the Giants passing offense paired with the Vikings rushing offense. The problem is the Vikings rushing offense sucks. So you're kind of putting faith in them being efficient or getting Dalv work in the passing game. So I might view Daniel Jones at a 0.75 as opposed to a half, maybe, because the rushing is very good.
Yeah.
He hasn't been efficient since Isaiah Hodgins really separated, but like he's had good FanDuel point outputs because of the rushing. So I would say Jones is more of a 0.75. Like if we do the 10 lineup question, I would probably have Jones in 1.
I think that's fair. And I don't think that that's getting like trying to get exposure to everyone. Jones has a path to a ceiling because of the rushing. At this point, it's like the Giants are really weird with like what sample to use. I just looked at after the Wan'Dale Robinson injury, but excluding week 18 in that split, just 211 yards. What's that?
What weeks is that?
12 through 17. So it's like recent.
I had the same one. It was when Isaiah Hodgins' role expanded, which is the way I pitched it. But yeah, same sample.
But 6.7 rushes per game, 46 yards per game for Jones. I think that's fun. Again, if you're playing the angle of maybe Baltimore Cincinnati plays, like a classic AFC North game, and it's 21. Well, I don't want to throw up point total for Baltimore, but and then maybe Josh Allen just doesn't completely erupt. Like Daniel Jones could be in the perfect lineup, and it wouldn't surprise me. And he has some good, some solid pass catchers to pair him with. I think straight up, I prefer, once I account for salary, Darius Slayton. In that sample that I cited, he's got an 18% target share, 38% air yard share, 12-yard ADOT. That leads the team. Richie James has the best target share at 23%. Hodgins is at 19.7%, but has better leverage. I think they're all in play. I think people will most prefer Richie James just due to the safety of like target totals, but the juice on them is good enough to go with Slayton or Hodgins over James. Not to discount James or say like I wouldn't touch him in stacks with Jones, but we have 3 guys who I think are relevant here.
I think the primary pitch for Slayton is the matchup because the Vikings let up a very high ADOT defensively, and he's the guy who best fits that, meshes with that. So in the first matchup, week 15, Or 16, I don't know, whatever week it was. 16?
I have 16, but
16, yeah, week 16. In that game, Richie James 11 targets, Isaiah Hodgins 11 targets, Saquon 9, Darius Slayton had just 6, but he had 3 deep targets for 79 yards receiving in that game. So that to me is the pitch where he can get downfield work against a defense that lets up a lot of downfield work. He has the lowest salary, and I'm not like taking a total swing for the fences. In that 6-game sample with Hodgins snaps up, Slayton is last of that 4-player group in targets per game at 5.5, but he leads in deep targets at 1.7. And I think that's valuable playing indoors against a defense that lets up a lot of downfield attempts. I would rank Hodgins second, similar to you. James third. I think they're all in play. That's not to say I won't use Richie James. I think I'm fine with him. But I agree with you that Slayton is the best guy on this team for this week.
Any Daniel Bellinger?
No. You?
I think it's viable if you're like going with
It's viable. I just don't want to do it.
That sums up a lot of these smaller slate plays, but
yeah, I think I'd rather get to Dawson Knox at 56. I don't think TJ Hawkinson's pretty good. Relative to salary even.
All right. So a lot of Giants we like, but where are we with Saquon? How much of a priority is he? Saquon versus Josh Allen, somewhat similar salaries. Like who are you most fearful not to have in your lineup between those two?
For the 2-game or 3-game slate, I view Josh Allen as being the bigger priority. What about you?
Same.
Yeah, I think having Dalv at $1,000 lower is the primary reason there. The Giants, so to prepare for this, I was going to my sheet and looking at like where teams rank in different metrics that I have, and doing like early down passing, early down rushing. The Giants are in the 0th percentile. Is that a thing? 0th or 1st percentile? They're dead last against the rush on early downs. They're very good on late downs because Wink Martindale is a psycho, but like early downs against the rush, they trash. The Vikings are too, so that is again worth noting. They're very bad as a rushing team, but I still think that Dalv is the better play straight up. I think he and Saquon are in the same tier, but I prefer Dalv after accounting for salary.
I agree.
Any final thoughts for you on this game? Anything else here?
KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen,
I suppose. Okay, so looking at the sample on them since Hawkinson came to town, Thielen's at 6 targets per game, KJ Osborne 5.9, excluding week 18. Thielen 1.1 deep targets, 1.1 red zone targets, Osborne 0.8 in both those. So Thielen has had the better workloads, but his production is doggy do. So despite the fact that production has favored Thielen, I think I would still go Osborne over him. And I think that Osborne, if we get to a situation where all the Giants guys are super popular and like looking at optimizers right now, they are popping a lot. I could see Osborne being a really good pivot, and Gabe Davis too, being a good pivot off those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want enough Jefferson and Hawkinson, but in those lineups where I do play Saquon and go somewhere else, I mean, I don't know. I haven't tinkered enough to know if I can play Josh Allen and Saquon and how I feel about that. But I think Osborne and Saquon is enough to like start you on a different path, and you don't have to get completely wild with everything else. But
yeah,
I think KJ Osborne himself is gonna throw a wrench into like the lineups, and like you said, similar workloads overall. Maybe preferring Thielen, but we've seen Osborne pop off with huge games.
Yeah,
I don't know if Adam Thielen has that.
I agree. Okay, let's move now to the Sunday night game. Ravens at Bengals. Right now, the Bengals are 8.5-point favorites. Total is down to 40.5. And that's not great for DFS. We want higher totals, tight spreads. This is not that. Still think the Bengals are pretty interesting. Lamar Jackson missed practice Wednesday. He's probably going to sit this week. Tyler Huntley was throwing left-handed during practice, which seems bad because he is a righty, if you did not know. He has a right shoulder injury. It sounds like he's actually like in question. I think he'll play, but like it's not great. Gus Edwards missed practice because he is in concussion protocol. T. Higgins didn't practice Wednesday, but it was due to an illness. He should be good to go this week. So this game, if you look at it from a like traditional process perspective, is gross. I think if the world fixates on Josh Allen and that Vikings Giants game, I think that Joe Burrow becomes supremely attractive for daily fantasy as a be different without being dumb candidate. That's kind of my key thought on this game. Where are you at with this one from the top down?
I'm with you. Like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase stacks don't make as much sense as Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs just from a process standpoint. But once you factor in variance, once you factor in popularity and trying to win tournaments, I would not be surprised if Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are just like the Sunday night hammers on this slate to bring back that old term.
Yep.
I think I saw some comments from Jamar Chase saying he was like not happy with how Baltimore was playing them last week. And while I don't usually put stock into that, Jamar Chase is one of the guys who I think could do something about that. So I think Jamar Chase makes a ton of sense. I know I ranked Stephon Diggs ahead of him for game environment from like a baseline standpoint, but boy, it wouldn't take much for me to go pivot to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in lineups because we know that upside is like 30 points for each of them.
Yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I know that like you look at the efficiency for the Bengals in those two Ravens games they've played, it's been bad, especially relative to what they've been doing. But if you look at them against like tougher defenses, so looking at it's kind of top 10, but I looped the Steelers in there too because they had TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick for that game. So I put the Steelers in there too. So it's kind of a fake split. But in that sample, Burrow 22.0 FanDuel points per game. This is just since they changed their scheme in week 5. 0.08 passing net expected points per dropback. It's not great, but it's not terrible. And the Bengals 27.4 real world points per game. 37 in one, 34 in another. They can beat good defenses. The Ravens are that. Definitively. But I have faith in the Bengals putting up points here. And I think that Burrow would be the key catalyst. And he saves you $1,200 off of Josh Allen. So let's have the quarterback discussion now. Full 6-game slate. How do you view the quarterbacks there?
Full 6-game slate?
Yeah.
I still want to have the most Allen just because the ceiling is 40 points. I love Joe Burrow. He can put up 40, but it's going to come from 5 or 6 touchdowns, which I know he has done that to Baltimore in the past, but I don't think it's quite the same situation. I'd go Allen, Herbert, Burrow, Lawrence.
Yeah. And I think those 4 are the primary. Honestly, they're my only consideration set for that slate. Like Jones could jump in there. Cousins could jump in there, but I think I kind of want to keep it to those 4.
Those 4 guys are enough where you're betting against some solid games for sure.
Superstars.
If you're going down to like a Brock Purdy or something, you're saying 4 of these guys are all tanking.
Yeah. Do you get a question on YouTube from One Eye Jack Productions asking about concerns around the Bengals offensive line injuries? Alex Kappa not going to play this game. He got hurt in week 18 against this Ravens team. And it's always a concern when an offensive line that had been gelling due to continuity now is down 2 starters, Lyle Collins also out. So it's a good question. The reason I am not going to get off the Bengals despite that is the sample I'm looking at here is the Bengals from week 5 on. And that's when they changed their scheme to be more of a shotgun type offense. That includes 2 bad games against the Ravens. We're not cherry picking here. It's just based on where their scheme changed. And it includes the entire absence for Jamar Chase, a couple of out games for T. Higgins. In that time, Burrow's at 0.22 passing net expected points per dropback. Cyborg stuff in that time, despite having no Jamar Chase, no T. Higgins in some of those games. So yeah, it stinks to lose offensive line, but they've shown they can excel without key players before. So I think, Jack, it's more of me having faith in the coaching staff navigating around that is why I'm still there. But it's a good question to ask about that because it is a fair concern to have with them. Joe Mixon, what are you doing with him? Because if you look at the workload in the games since he came back, it has not been great, but still 24 adjusted opportunities per game in that sample. That's not bad for $7,900. It's actually a bit above Dalvin Cook in his most relevant sample. Matchup very much favors Dalvin Cook. But Mixon getting a lot of work in the passing game. He's losing stuff to Samaje Perine, but I don't think he's out of play. So I think for the 6-game slate, I can cross them off because I get access to Travis Etienne, Tony Pollard, stuff like that. But for the 3-gamer, how do you view Mixon there? And then talk to me about J.K. Dobbins after that.
I think I have some combination of Saquon, Dalvin, and Jeff Wilson as my top 3.
Okay.
With Mixon probably 4, then Dobbins 5.
Is Dobbins in the Mixon tier or no?
I initially don't have him there. No,
I agree.
I don't think that there's a path for J.K. Dobbins to demolish this slate. What's the salary? 66.
Like, I think he's one of those plays who could wind up being a Jamal Williams type, where he's in the perfect lineup.
Yeah.
And you wish you had used him, but he's not going to be the slate changer, like the guy you needed to take down every tournament. He could be in the perfect lineup without being a guy you needed to take it down.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm viewing it. Now, that being said, I don't love Joe Mixon. Even in week 18, you'd think important game for them. 56% snap rate overall, but 56% in the first half as well. So it wasn't like it got scaled back at all.
Right.
We know that he's not going to be their 2-minute running back because they just don't use him that way. He's sort of a differentiation piece. It's sort of a bet against the Bills putting up a ton of points, and therefore you're not necessarily jamming in Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. Instead, you're building around maybe the Bengals, or maybe you go, I'm playing Daniel Jones. I think that the Giants-Vikings game is the best game of the week. Therefore, I don't think Joe Burrow is going to do a ton. Jamar Chase not going to do a ton. And Joe Mixon, they're just going to kind of control the game because that's all they need to do. I think that makes sense logically. That's not my first, second, or even third thought process, but that's kind of stuff you got to think about when you're building lineups. So I think for me, Mixon on this Sunday slate, the RB4.
Yeah, and that might be low enough where he's not, super in consideration.
And because again, I'm not necessarily playing 3 running backs in every lineup on these smaller slates.
Correct. Let's talk about the non-Chase Bengals pass catchers. T. Higgins' salary coming in for the Sunday only slate. He is $7,600. Again, missed practice Wednesday due to illness, but he should be good to go. We got Tyler Boyd at $6,000, and we have Hayden Hurst at $5,100. How do you view those guys on this slate?
I think Hurst and Boyd are specific to whether I'm playing Joe Burrow. I don't want to get overexposed to this game if I'm not playing Burrow.
Correct.
Because then I don't think that it's going to be necessarily a great game.
Mm-hmm.
I have an 8-game split with Jamar, T, and Mixon all playing at least half the snaps. In that sample, Jamar is at 27% of the targets, but T. Higgins still 22%, then it bumps down to Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon at 14 and Hurst at 13. So it is kind of still concentrated, like a 13, 14% target share from a value guy. Can work on a smaller slate, but I'm not going out of my way to roster Tyler Boyd or Hayden Hurst very often. I'd rather take the value with the Giants, Vikings guys KJ Osborne over Tyler Boyd for me. So
we talked about quarterback dictating tight end. Would that apply to Hurst with Burrow? Like a Burrow Chase lineup, are you putting Hurst in there, or are you seeing if you can get to guys like Dawson Knox or TJ Hawkinson? Because I think that I would be okay omitting Hurst from my Burrow stacks, despite my inclination to lump the tight end in with the quarterback for the most part.
Yeah, I'd probably try to get to Hawkinson there because realistically, if I'm playing Burrow and Jamar, I'm not playing Jefferson or Diggs as well.
True.
Probably not playing Saquon there. So the best access to another stud is probably going to be Hawkinson.
Very fair.
So
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think Boyd relative to the Thielens, Osborns, all those guys in the 6,000 range, we got a lot of them. I think he's above Thielen for me, but that's kind of it. Maybe he should be above Osborne, honestly. I don't know. That's tough.
I think they're similar, and I think that Osborne has the larger ceiling.
That's fair. Okay. Any final thoughts for you on this game or on this 3-game slate?
Just quickly, any Ravens pass catchers? Is
Nope.
it just Dobbins
Nope.
and log
Mhm.
out? If that, okay.
Even on a 3-game slate, I can do better. So
Yeah.
I will. Okay. Let's finish up here with the Monday night game. Now, it's worth noting the single game slate is not posted yet on FanDuel. So we're talking about that without salaries, but also including it in talking about the full 6-game slate. So Cowboys at Bucks. Cowboys 2.5-point favorites. Total is 45.5. No injury reports yet for this game because their first practice is today on Thursday. So no practice reports, but I'd expect everyone here to be pretty good to go, which means we can analyze it straight up. I think, again, going back to something I alluded to earlier, I think Tony Pollard is one of those guys who could potentially get a snap rate bump because it is a high leverage game. As a result of that, for the 6-game slate, if I want to be different without being dumb, he is one of the first guys I turn to. So to me, Pollard is the primary focus in this game. Where are you on Pollard? And then if you want to start with any thoughts on this game, you can. But let's talk about Pollard quick.
I like Pollard. I don't even know necessarily, because the salary is down to 6,900, how much I need like a huge bump in his workload. I have a sample weeks 12 through 16, which is with Pollard and Zeke, post Pollard's breakout, Dak back, not using week 18. Pollard 53% of the snaps, Zeke 50%, Pollard edging him out in adjusted opportunities per game with 22.8, 83 yards per game, 4.6 targets per game. I think there are a lot of paths to seeing Tony Pollard just get sort of peppered out of the backfield in this spot. And with the salary being down, because these guys have been up at like 8,000 lately, it's not there. And so I think Pollard makes sense from a baseline standpoint, even with what his workload is.
Right.
Like, what's realistically, they're not exactly the same, but it's not like J.K. Dobbins at 6,600 has a huge snap rate leverage, and they're like Pollard. I would bank on Pollard playing just as many snaps from a baseline with room to grow. So I think Tony Pollard is a phenomenal 6-game slate play.
Yeah, I think that he's more attractive on the 6-game slate because there are other running backs in that range who people will like, and they're flawed. Kenneth Walker is a almost 10-point dog against the best defense in football right now, based on my numbers. So that's a downside. J.K. Dobbins, his team stinks. So that's a positive for them as well. And also, I don't think Pollard's going to project well in terms of like optimizers. I think that because I've run them and I know that he doesn't pop in those very often. I would say at running back for a tournament on a 6-game slate, even though he's not like the quote unquote priority in terms of like being under salaried, he might be a priority for me in terms of getting a guy with a massive ceiling at a low roster rate. I would say he's probably one of the first guys I plug in for a 6-game slate, just because I want to make that assumption that he can go bananas.
Yeah, and I do think that there are enough names at running back on the 6-game slate from the studs down through the salary that I will flex a running back on the 6-game slate.
I agree.
For sure. But yeah, Pollard, and if you're going to play him on the 6-game slate, make sure he's in your flex.
Agreed. Unless you don't have a running back in your flex. But yeah, because like then, let's say hypothetically, you get to Monday and you think, okay, Pollard to be popular, I need to differentiate. You've got Chris Godwin there at 72. You could switch to Zeke as another guy. You've got options if you need to differentiate. So keep that option open to you there.
Would you consider swapping
to Zeke?
No.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
To Leonard Fournette.
It's a good question. Playoff Lenny, he's back. He was tweeting about playoff Lenny, which I think adds to the narrative.
Nice.
Fournette, in the 5 full games for him since he came back, 82 yards from scrimmage per game, 25% red zone share, 10.8 carries, 6.4 targets. So actually like good numbers. Maybe that goes up in the playoffs. So
yeah,
I don't think it's dumb.
I think it's telling too that like, Rachaad White was supposed to sort of take over, and once Lenny came back and was healthy,
and Rachaad White played deeper into last week's game too. Lenny sat almost immediately, which I think is important to note.
Yeah, so 55% of the snaps for him, and I have the same sample since his return. 23.6 adjusted opportunities. He can get targets. That he's kind of game script proof from that sense, where he's not going to get scripted out just if they trail. I think that he makes a lot of sense, and I'm starting to feel like there's fear that there's too many running backs on the 6-game slate.
What a problem to have.
Yeah.
This is a fun slate still. I think the 6-game slate is awesome. So
Yeah,
I will have a lot in there as opposed to the other ones personally. But I think that Fournette is definitely an option there. Where do you view him relative to Walker and then Jeff Wilson for the 6-game slate?
Like I have higher expectations for this offense.
Yeah.
Assuming there's no Mostert,
yeah,
I'd probably go Wilson 1 just for the guaranteed workload.
$400 discount too. It doesn't hurt.
I might go Fournette over Walker.
I don't think that's wrong.
I'm really worried. Like watching the Seahawks lately is not fun. It used to be fun. It's not very fun. And they got a tough matchup coming. So
watching Gino run in overtime was pretty fun. But I guess no, that wasn't OT. That was regulation still. But that was fun. Outside of that, yeah, you're primarily right.
Not that the Buccaneers offense is the most fun.
Right. So like also from like a win expectancy perspective, I have the Seahawks win odds in their game. This is not like a, 1-for-1. Their win odds to me 20 that's the implied odds. 21.4%. And I have the Bucks win odds at, that's not right. Is it? Oh, it's Dallas. Okay. I was like, okay, that's weird. I have Tampa Bay's win odds at 43.8%. So pretty high. So relative to Seattle, at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably Lenny over Walker, as weird as that is. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Okay. One final note on Pollard. If I have a single entry lineup for Monday night, I am putting Pollard in my highest dollar single entry MVP slot, personally. I think
I don't disagree with that.
Okay. Let's talk about the Dallas passing offense here. Is Dak in play for you on the 6-game slate? And what are you doing with CeeDee Lamb and the other guys?
I don't think on the 6-game slate. I love Dak. I think that he gets a bad rap, but I don't know if the true upside is high enough. Now, in weeks 12 through 16, he's at 263 yards, 2.4 touchdowns. It's still not like a lot of picks, but still efficient from an EPA standpoint. Despite that, I just don't know if the true upside is quite there, but I wouldn't really talk anyone out of it, especially because I feel like most people are going to study the Saturday and Sunday slates more and assume that, they're not going to take as much interest in this Monday night game, but I can see the case for it. Obvious stack candidate specifically with CeeDee Lamb has got a 26% target share in that sample. If you go through, like he's at 8.4 targets per game, but if you account for red zone target, like the added value of a red zone target and a downfield target, I have him at the equivalent of 12.1 targets per game, which is pretty sick. So like Dak, CeeDee Lamb stack and like chalk everywhere else, still going to be pretty different on the full slate. So
yeah,
I think that's fun.
And I think if I don't go Pollard at MVP, I would go Lamb as the other option for an MVP on the single game slate, just kind of the guys with most easy to envision paths to upside.
Yeah.
Talking about the 6-game slate here, we got Lamb at 81. I think that he's a lot better than Keenan at 84, personally, just due to upside. I like him more than Evans at 77, like him more than Higgins at 76. I think the low 7,000 range is very good. You got DK there. Mike Williams, if he plays down there. Debo 69 is right there. So I do like the low 7,000 range, but I think on the 6-game slate, getting to CeeDee Lamb is pretty enticing. I prefer Pollard just because I think he'll be pretty low rostered, but I think that Lamb also has a decent amount of appeal.
Yeah, no problems with Lamb. What about Gallup, Schultz, anyone else for you, pass catcher wise?
I'm almost in HBAB realm with the Gallup, which for the uninitiated is hit by a bus. I'd rather get hit by a bus and use Michael Gallup. Almost there, not quite, especially now that we have smaller slates. Gallup's salary is down to $5,600. That is very low. CD Lamb will command the majority of the attention. That's good, but like just the yardage upside is bad. It's bad. Like for the single game slate, whatever, fine. But I prefer Schultz by a wide margin over Gallup if I'm forced to use one of those guys.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure this out on the fly here. Because you pulled a guess Gabe Davis's target share since week 6, or since their bye or whatever that was.
So I have the shares I have for the Cowboys are 8 games with Tony Pollard. So omitting week 17 since their bye, because Noah Brown played all those games.
Okay. I have weeks 12 through 16, which again was like post Pollard's breakout, Dak back, not using week 18. Where would you think Gallup is in terms of target share?
16%.
18.4.
Okay. It's not bad. I think that I would need this game to shoot out, and I took the under in this game, so probably not going to see a shootout there, personally.
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay. Tom Brady projects well from a passing yardage perspective. I don't want to use him. Maybe you do. Don't want to get there personally. What are your thoughts on Brady and then the Bucs pass catchers as well?
Sorry, I saw Dak at 73, and I saw Brock Purdy at 71, and my brain just read Tom Brady, and I was like, wait, I haven't actually seen Tom Brady yet. So Tom Brady lower salary than Geno, Tua, who's out, Purdy. So that's kind of
it's Tom Brady, Skylar Thompson, and then Anthony Brown bringing up the rear, or I guess Huntley if he plays. Like it's grim.
I think people might be willing enough to chase like Tom Brady, Mike Evans to the point that they're overvalued.
I agree.
On a 6-game slate, I'm not going there. Even on the single game slate, like Tom Brady's not going to be an MVP play for me.
I agree.
I'd rather go different and either go with Dak or a skill player, and not GM and a quarterback there. So it is what it is. Since week 13, excluding week 18, like only Chris Godwin has better than a 20% target share, and he's at 20.8%. They just really spread the ball around a lot.
They do throw a lot, though.
They do.
I have 5 full games with Russell Gage being back, which might be the same sample you're using.
Yeah.
9.8 targets per game for Godwin, which is good. 1.2 red zone targets per game, but 0.4 deep targets per game. So his ADOT is super low. And on a 6-game slate, that does matter. On a single game slate, not as much, but like 6-gamer where we have really good plays right around him, like DK, maybe Mike Williams, Debo, that's tougher. So his volume is fine. I just don't know if there's enough juice in the targets right now.
I'm with you. I have him at 11.9 weighted targets. Evans at 12.5, which I know I said Lamb was at 12.1. So, but I just kind of find a difference between CeeDee Lamb and Mike Evans. Maybe Mike Evans is back. I don't know.
Maybe,
but
yeah. Evans in that sample, 8.4 overall targets, 2.2 deep targets. So he's getting downfield work. That does include the Carolina game. So he has that in his range of outcomes. But how likely is it to happen? I don't know. And Evans' salary on the 6-game slate is 77. So within $400 a Lamb, I prefer Lamb by a pretty decent margin there.
Yep.
Cade Otton is a lower salary tight end. He comes in at $4,700 on the 6-game slate. I mean, his snap rate is very good. Even with Brait playing recently, has been very good. But his yards per route run is negative. I'm pretty sure you can fact check me on that. But I think it's negative.
What?
It's not. I lied. Let me lie. Come on. I said
0.61.
Close enough. Same thing.
And a catch rate over expectation of minus 23.5%.
So that's why I prefer Parkinson at the same salary, despite the fact Parkinson is not the lead tight end on his own team. And his team might get its doors blown off. Where are you at in Otton?
Yeah, not really there. Single game slate, different conversation. You know, if I like maybe do play Tom Brady, not at the MVP, and go Otton and just sort of fade the other pass catchers, then sure. But yeah, that's about it.
So you're saying you're not on Otton?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Any final thoughts for you on this game, on anything else across Super Wild Card Weekend? I hate that phrase.
I think we covered everything in this game. I know it was a lot of like if-then statements,
right?
Probably from me especially, but
they're necessary.
I think it's necessary, and like think through how your lineup's going to interact on a full like 10 to 12 or 13 game slate. We try to find the best process plays because that's going to win out long term. On a smaller slate, it's not to say play bad process plays, but it's the process doesn't matter as much because there's going to be a way more variance with fewer games to pick from. So I think that's the key, and I find it fun because I like just assuming that there's going to be some chaos and fading very obvious plays because I just hate myself, I guess. But I think that's important this week, being open to being wrong and being different.
Yeah. I'm also like warming to the slate even more. I think the running backs are really good on the 6-game slate.
Yeah.
There are ways to be different without being dumb. There are teams I like. So I think it's a fun slate. I'm excited to get things rolling on Saturday with that first game with the Seahawks and the 49ers. That is all that we have here for today for this wild card weekend preview. But we are back with you once again next week to break down the divisional round. Same format, breaking down each game, talking about the various available to you. To get that as it is posted, make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And also check out the Daily ISO with Tom Vecchio, Heat Check, Austin Swaim doing UFC stuff there as well. We have PGA, all in the same feed. And the NFL one's also live on the FanDuel YouTube page Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. I want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with all your lineups across the slates for Wild Card Weekend. We'll talk to you all once again next week for the divisional round. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.